Imagine a journey that began more than 70,000 years ago, when our ancestors set forth from Africa, venturing across continents and crossing vast oceans, eventually arriving on a land of breathtaking diversity and challenge. What if we told you that these early pioneers not only survived in one of the world's harshest environments, but thrived, developing a profound connection with their land and passing on their wisdom through stories that are like no other. In this video, we'll uncover the astonishing story of the Aboriginal Australians, a tale of resilience, environmental stewardship, and a living, breathing culture that has endured for millennia. So, get ready to be amazed by the incredible journey of the world's oldest living culture. Long ago, perhaps more than 70,000 years in the past, the ancestors of today's Aboriginal Australians were embarking on a monumental journey. They were some of the earliest modern humans who left Africa. These intrepid travelers ventured across the world, eventually reaching the vast continent of Australia. The exact details of how they arrived here remain a topic of ongoing research and speculation. What is generally believed is that they undertook this incredible migration through a combination of land bridges and short sea crossings. As sea levels fluctuated over time, these resourceful pioneers found ways to navigate the changing landscapes and reach Australia's shores. Australia, as you might know, is a land of incredible contrasts. It's a place where you can find deserts that stretch for miles, lush and ancient rainforests, stunning coastal regions, and arid inland areas. The diversity of environments found on the continent is nothing short of astounding. To thrive in this varied landscape, the early Aboriginal cultures needed to develop a diverse set of skills. They had to understand the local flora and fauna intimately, recognizing what could be eaten, used for shelter, or employed for tools and medicines. Their knowledge of the land was, and still is, profound. What truly sets them apart is their mastery of sustainable land management techniques. Long before words like environmental sustainability became buzzworthy, the Aboriginal peoples practiced it. They harnessed techniques such as controlled burning to clear underbrush, reduce the risk of wildfires, and promote the growth of certain plants. They created complex fish traps and engaged in farming practices that ensured a steady supply of resources. It was all about maintaining the balance and ensuring that the land would remain abundant for generations to come. Their adaptability was awe-inspiring. They knew how to work with nature rather than against it. Their lives were intricately woven into the fabric of the land, and they lived in harmony with it. The early Aboriginal Australians were true pioneers, not just in their journey to this ancient land, but in their ability to understand, adapt to, and thrive in one of the most diverse and challenging environments on Earth. Their legacy is a testament to the incredible human capacity for ingenuity and resilience. When it comes to knowledge, the Aboriginal cultures primarily passed things down through spoken word, stories, songs, dances, and rituals. The Dreamtime or dreaming stories were at the heart of their cultural and spiritual transmission. Imagine sitting by a campfire, surrounded by your family, and listening to stories passed down through the ages. That's how Aboriginal Australians have been sharing their knowledge for centuries. They didn't write it all down in books. They spoke it, sang it, danced it, and performed it in rituals. These Dreamtime stories serve several purposes. First, they're like the ultimate origin stories. They explain how the world, the land, and all living things were created. Think of it as Mother Nature's version of Once Upon a Time. But these tales are more than just bedtime stories. They're guides for life. Dreamtime stories offer a roadmap for how to behave, how to treat one another, and how to care for the land. They're like the rule book for living in harmony. And when it comes to land, Aboriginal Australians have a deep, almost spiritual connection. The Dreamtime stories emphasize their role as custodians, responsible for looking after the land and making sure it stays healthy. It's like a sacred duty, handed down through the generations. These stories aren't just for telling, they're for doing. Aboriginal communities use them as a foundation for their rituals and ceremonies. These events help keep the balance between the spiritual world and the physical world. They're like the glue that holds everything together. Dreamtime stories vary from one Aboriginal group to another. Each group has its own unique stories that are specific to their region. It's like they've got their own set of legends, as diverse as the landscapes they call home. The Dreamtime is like a rich tapestry of stories, beliefs, and traditions. It's not set in stone. It's a living, breathing part of Aboriginal culture. They express it through art, song, dance, and rituals. It's their way of preserving their heritage and passing it on to the next generation. They give them a sense of who they are, a connection to the land, and a guide for living. It's like the oldest storybook in the world, and it's still being written with every telling. One important thing we shouldn't forget when talking about the story of the Aboriginal people is their art. Aboriginal art is filled with intricate patterns, vibrant colors, and symbols that tell deep stories. It's like their way of talking through paintings. One of the oldest forms of Aboriginal art is rock art, and not rock and roll, but more like a history book etched into the rocks, spread all across Australia. These ancient paintings and carvings on rocks aren't just random doodles. They're stories of the Dreamtime, historical events, and even maps that guide travelers. Some of these artworks date back thousands of years, giving us a peek into the past. In the northern parts of Australia, some artists use tree bark as their canvas. They created these breathtaking bark paintings that usually tell Dreamtime stories. The choice of colors and symbols in these paintings can be unique to a specific clan or group. It's a way of keeping cultural knowledge alive. Now, let's talk about dot paintings. This is a more recent style that emerged in the 70s, but it's still tied through tradition. Artists use tiny dots to create intricate patterns that represent parts of their dreaming stories. The colors and how the dots are arranged can carry very specific messages and meanings. And then there's body painting. This has been a part of Aboriginal culture for as long as anyone can remember. It's used during ceremonies and rituals to show a connection to the dreaming or to tell important stories. The designs, often done with colorful ochre pigments, have both cultural and spiritual significance. But what makes Aboriginal art even more fascinating is its cultural and spiritual importance. Every symbol, color, or pattern has a deep meaning. These artworks are like a way of keeping their cultural knowledge alive, which is especially crucial since they rely so much on oral traditions. Today, Aboriginal art isn't just a thing of the past, it's a thriving part of the present. There's a whole contemporary art scene, and many Aboriginal artists are adapting their traditional styles to create modern works. When the Europeans arrived in the late 18th century, they claimed the land as their own, often without understanding or respecting the Aboriginal connection to it. This led to the forced removal of many Aboriginal people from their ancestral lands, a place that held deep cultural and spiritual meaning. Sacred sites, full of cultural and spiritual significance, were often obliterated during colonization. This loss of cultural heritage had a profound impact on the spiritual and cultural identity of indigenous communities. And then, there were the diseases. The Europeans brought with them a whole host of diseases that Aboriginal Australians had never encountered before. Smallpox, influenza, tuberculosis. These diseases devastated indigenous populations, leading to significant declines in their numbers. This demographic impact is still visible today, as some language groups and cultures were pushed to the brink of extinction. Violence and conflict were all too common during this period. Massacres, forced relocations, and clashes over land and resources resulted in significant loss of life and left deep scars of trauma within indigenous communities. To make matters worse, many Aboriginal people were subjected to forced labor. They worked on pastoral properties, in the pearl diving industry, and various other industries under exploitative conditions. This labor often came with little to no compensation and contributed to the economic exploitation of Indigenous Australians. The disruption didn't stop there. European colonization shook traditional Aboriginal social structures, languages, and kinship systems. Missionaries and government policies aimed at assimilation tried to replace Aboriginal culture with European customs and beliefs. This led to the loss of many cultural practices and languages, a loss that is still felt today. One of the darkest chapters in this story is the stolen generations. Aboriginal children were forcibly removed from their families, a policy aimed at assimilating them into European culture. This caused immense trauma for those children and their families, and it's still a source of pain and healing for many Aboriginal communities. The impacts of colonization are still felt today. High rates of poverty, unemployment, poor health, and limited access to education continue to be challenges faced by Aboriginal communities. Disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians persist in many areas of life. As we conclude our journey into the world of Aboriginal Australians, we are left with a profound appreciation for the resilience and ingenuity of this incredible people. Through their deep connection to the land, sustainable land management techniques, and the transmission of knowledge through Dreamtime stories, Aboriginal Australians have preserved their heritage and values. However, their history is also marked by the painful impact of European colonization, including the loss of land, some traditional practices, and the trauma of the stolen generations. Despite these challenges, the strength and resilience of Aboriginal communities endure as they continue to assert their rights for a brighter future. The legacy of colonization remains a complex and ongoing issue in Australian society, but the spirit of survival and resilience shines brightly in the hearts of Indigenous Australians. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may the wisdom of the Aboriginal Australians continue to inspire us all.